Another lie of the Remainers. This one is even more obscene than the most of the ones that they churn out. It's the lie that being a member of the European Union does not result in a loss of sovereignty in being a member. This is faulty on 2 points. The first point being that the Remainers don't understand the term of art sovereignty, and the second point being that the Remainers don't understand the European Union to which they align to, and how this organisation diminishes the sovereignty of its member states. So first off, we've got to work out what does sovereignty mean. Very simple. Sovereignty just means where the ultimate power of state lies. It could be in a monarch, it could be in a legislature, it could be in a I don't know, in a magic book or something like that. So it is the ultimate authority to which a state has. And sovereignty is a long-standing principle of international law. International law is actually dependent upon the recognition of state sovereignty, because if you don't respect a state's sovereignty, then you can't respect treaties and you can't respect the agreements and relationships between sovereign states. So, in Britain, the ultimate form of sovereignty is the monarch in Parliament. It's the fusion of the two great estates of the realm, Parliament and the monarchy. It's just kind of this dynamic tension between the two, in that the monarchy is essentially the head of state and all authority flows from them, but Parliament has the ultimate law-making ability which could and has limited and controlled the nature of the monarchy. So it's like a circle with arrows pointing back at themselves. But being a member of the European Union does result in a significant reduction in a nation's sovereignty, because when you are a member, you sign up to have the laws of the European Union, the community laws, and the judgments of the ECJ to be your superior law that cannot be undone by the legislation of your own national lawmaking bodies. It's that simple. The counter-argument that remains to say, well, yes, but we could have overridden any EU law we liked, but we didn't. Well, that itself is wrong, because Britain tried to override, let me see, from memory, 2 pieces of EU law deliberately, and the courts rejected both. The cases were the Metric Martyrs case, which is Thorburn, and the famous Factortame cases. This is where Parliament passed legislation which conflicted with a law from the EU, and the court said, yes, ordinarily when a newer statute conflicts with older legislation, the newer statute is deemed to have implicitly repealed the former and therefore is the new law. Except when it comes to EU law. That was the new rule that the courts made up then and there to get themselves out of an interesting problem. So Parliament did try to legislate contrary to the EU, and failed. So the sovereignty of Parliament, as recognised by the courts, was significantly diminished by being a member of the EU. And the areas of law that we lost authority over were more or less controlled by the nature of the treaties that functions as the primary legislation of the EU, the sort of constitution of its makeup. So things like environmental law, commercial law, not trust law, what's it called? Competitive law, fisheries, things of that nature. But then again, the other counter-argument was, we didn't lose any sovereignty because we could have left at any time we wanted. Yes, but it's kind of like, imagine you go on holiday to another country. When you are walking and talking on their soil, you are subject to their jurisdiction and their law. You have the choice to leave the country, and that's the only choice you have to remove yourself from their jurisdiction. Unless you work at an embassy or something, but that's a loophole. So when we were in the club, we were under the rules of the club. Okay? I explained this once to someone who was having trouble, a Remainer who, unsurprisingly, was having trouble grasping these relatively straightforward concepts. It's kind of like, imagine you own a car. Your name is on all the bits of paper, you pay for it, you bought it, you insure it, you're legally responsible for it. But you let someone else borrow the keys. On paper, you own the car, but in reality, your friend who's driving around doing God knows what has control of the car. That is essentially what being a member of the EU is. You hand the keys over to an office in Belgium. So, to say that we didn't lose sovereignty just is demonstrably not true. The highest courts in the country disagreed with that premise when they explicitly said that being a member of the EU means that the Parliament has deliberately ceded a significant amount of its legislative competences. And then the more erudite Remainers, there's not many left, but the more erudite will usually vomit up a concept called, oh no, but when you're a member of the EU, it's a pooling of sovereignty, not a reduction of sovereignty. They hit us with this at law school. This is embarrassingly stupid. It's a bit like saying, imagine there's 10 people, and I said, right, we need to pool our finances. So you open up your wallet and you put say you got 100 quid in your pocket, put 50 quid in the centre, and I am now in charge of all that money in the centre. Your sovereignty hasn't been pooled, just like your money. You've lost money, and I am now under the control of it. So pooling of sovereignty is still a loss of sovereignty because a nation has had to give up its sovereignty to go into the pool to be controlled by a foreign corporation. The office in Belgium. So it's a superficial, sophistric, whatever it is, sleight of hand nonsense. We did lose sovereignty, okay? It's that simple. There's lots of examples of other long-standing British laws being devolved and nullified by, denigrated by membership. The classic one was the right of habeas corpus. The EU arrest warrant essentially abolished that, because what it meant was you could be arrested without reason and held without reason. That's just one example. So, yeah. So there you are. The very act of you allowing a foreign power to legislate for you is an act of losing sovereignty. It's that simple.